Hey folks, John with A&J Outdoors again, and today we're going to do one of those DIY projects. We're going to replace a hub assembly on our boat trailer. Now a lot of guys, gals, boat owners, right, we'll just go ahead and take it to the shop, have them replace that for you. There's nothing wrong with that. You want to spend the money to do that, so be it, right? But this is one of those ones that it really doesn't take a lot of fancy tools. It's not difficult to do. You might get a little greasy and that's about it, but you can save yourself literally hundreds of dollars if you do this one yourself. So I found where I got some water in the hub, seals failed. It's been on the trailer for quite a while now, so it's time to replace them. So I'm going to take you along to replace one of them. Alright, let's get to it. Alright, so as we do this, of course, safety is number one. We've got to jack this thing up to be able to get the tire off and get the hub off. So what I do is I hook the trailer to the truck, you can see up there at the front, and that stabilizes it so it's not going to go nowhere when I jack it up. And then I'll put wood and chock the tire, the other tire on the opposite side of the boat, and then jack it up. Now if you don't have a fancy rolling floor jack like I'm going to use to do this one, get your jack out of your vehicle, right? Your car, your truck. If you're towing a boat, you got a truck probably, your truck jack will work just fine. You just got to crank it up instead of pumping it up. All right, let's get busy on this thing. All right, first thing we got to do before we start trying to take that hub apart is we got to get that tire off, right? Well, we got to jack the trailer up, but before you jack the trailer up, loosen your lug nuts, because it'll be much harder to loosen when the tires off the ground, because the tire will spin as you're trying to loosen them. So pro tip number one from a non-pro: loosen the lug nuts first, then jack her up, then remove the tire. Well, I use air tools. God bless you, it'll make it a lot easier, but don't use the air tools to put them back on because you'll make them too tight. All right. I'm going to chock the other side of the trailer. Never trust your jack to hold it. Always use a jack stand. This cardboard box blowing away on me. Need to have rags. One thing I didn't show you. You'll typically have some kind of hubcap on there. Like that. Look at it, make sure there's not a special way it comes off, but typically, I'll show you how this one comes off. Typically there's a spot where there's an opening, like right here on this one, where you just take a long flathead screwdriver, whoop, little pry, off she comes. That's how easy that is, okay? So how do you know you got a hub that's gone bad or is going bad? What I do is I look at around the hub or the rim on this side and around the rim on the back side. That's where the seal is. And if you see grease coming out, you know if that's coming out, then water's getting in, potentially. So that's one thing. Another thing, when I'm driven to the lake, maybe a half hour, 45-minute drive, at a stop somewhere, put my hand down here on the rim. The rim should not be hot to the touch. You know, it's a hot day out, 100 degrees, it's going to be warm, but it shouldn't like, ooh, that's too hot to touch. That'll give you an idea that it's overheating. There's a problem, okay? And then the third thing is, and this is how I found it this time, you can, when it's sitting on the ground like it's supposed to be, you can grab this tire and try to rock it, okay? And what actually, I rocked the tire on the other side and it moved. You should not have play. So that's when I knew, hey, let me check it. So I pulled the cap off like you're about to see me do on this one, and I found water in the hub. Water in your hub, you've got to replace the seal at the very least. Okay. So that led me to check that one. Well, common sense says, hey, if that one has a problem, and I installed both of these at the same time several years ago, this one might have the same problem. So we're going to pull the cap, and I have a feeling we're probably going to find some corrosion in water. Tire is off. Okay, so all we're left with is the hub that looks quite rusty, and that's it. Get that somewhere out of the way. Okay, now it's time to get access to this hub so we can see what's going on. So not all caps are going to look like mine. Sometimes you'll have a cap that looks like this. Plain silver guy, right? They all mount on there the same way, and sometimes you'll have one that has a zerk fitting on the end of it where you can grease it with a grease gun. Usually a bearing buddy is what they're called. No matter which type you have, they all come off the same way. You just start tapping it. Kind of a, I don't pound on it because they'll dent up, right? But kind of just a different directions, trying to get it to tap out. With my free hand, I gain a little ground so I hold it. And there you go. You can see moisture, besides old grease, you can see moisture, and you can actually see some rust in there. Okay, so I have access. This is going to be my hand towel. I'm going to get my cardboard box to put pieces on. Piece of cardboard or a cardboard box is nice to have around because you put all these greasy parts on your vehicle or throw them on the ground. You got grease on the ground, so it's nice to throw them in there. Now, the type of hub I have, got a rubber seal here that pulls out. Okay, and the reason for that is this spindle, that's the piece that the hub mounts on, has a zerk fitting on the end of it. So when this is installed still, I can pull this off and I can grease my hub like that. And if you have one of these on there, you don't have that option. Your option is to pull the hub and grease everything by hand. Packing bearings and all that. Not fun stuff, okay? So this spindle is a nice setup. I like it. If you don't have a spindle with a zerk fitting on it like that, or a hub with a fitting, and I'll show you one of those in a minute, and you have one of these maybe, then you can replace this with what's called a bearing buddy. It's a cap like this. It has its own zerk fitting on it, so you can grease it. Just be careful. I went my first couple years with the boat for the first time. I blew out seals pretty regularly, you know, in a few months. And talking to my buddy at the boat shop here in San Antonio, Wayne, he explained that a lot of folks with those over grease, and when the thing heats up rolling down the road, it expands, blows out the seal, and now you're going to suck in water when you back it in the ramp. So don't over grease it, okay? So he said he doesn't even recommend bearing buddies to folks, but a lot of people use them, so just got to be smart about it. All right, so there's our cap off. I already knew I use that type, so I bought replacements for it. So this one here, I've got no use for it. It came in a kit though. All right, so next we need to get this big nut off of there. There's basically two systems. There might be more, but that I'm familiar with and aware of, there's two different ways that nut gets held in place, okay? There's either a cotter pin that goes through the spindle, right? So you have to turn the nut until it's lined up as tight as you can get it where you want it, right? That spins a little too freely. See how the hub moves? That's too much movement, right? You know there's an issue already. But you get that cotter pin, that's because I loosened it, never mind. And it goes through one of these openings in the castle nut, through the other end, and then you spread the ears on it, right? And that's how you hold it in place. This style, I can't have that hole through my spindle because there's a grease fitting going through it, right? So this uses a completely different style, and I'll show you in a minute here. Alright. This one's for my hands. Separate your rags. This one's for parts. Okay. So there's your castle nut. That's what I call it. I don't know if that's proper terminology, but you can see it looks kind of like a castle, top of a castle or a crown maybe. And then the next piece that's on there is this washer with 2 ears. Okay. So these ears, when it's on there like this and this castle nut comes around and I get it tight to where I want it, I line it up so that one of these ears lines up with one of these openings in the castle nut, and then I take a small screwdriver and I pry it down, and that's what keeps the nut from loosening, right? So instead of a cotter pin going through to keep it from loosening, this ear does. So I need this. The kit that I got didn't come with new castle nut, did not come with that, so I'm going to have to clean those. Alright, hand towel. Now there's going to be a washer, and then we start pulling the whole thing off. There's a washer, the outer bearings, outer bearing race, inner bearing seal. So, off. When you have gray grease, that's not the color the grease was. That's from, one, being contaminated with water, and two, probably a little bit of metal breakdown, right? As your bearings start to wear, it starts breaking down and that gets mixed into the oil. Okay, so here's our washer. Okay, greasy as all get out, and I'll clean all that because I got to reuse that too. Okay, then I can go ahead and show you here. Okay, there's your outer bearing, and I haven't looked at this yet, but you see that there's rust on that. Okay, so if that's rusting, you know this bad boy is shot. If it's gotten loose a little bit and they're worn because you've been using the trailer for a lot of miles, but the seal's still good and we didn't get any water in there to cause the corrosion that we're dealing with, you could replace these bearings, right? Or even repack these bearings if they're not too worn, and put it all back together. But this case, if you look, if you can see inside there, I've got rust inside there on the race, the bearing race, which I can't pull out now. So this stuff is shot. This whole hub bearing assembly needs to be replaced. And this one is probably similar to the other one, where the back of it here, the seal, this is the rear seal. This is what can blow out and cause leaks too, and it doesn't look that great. It gets hard, right? But it's rusted to this hub, right? Because the seal is this is the metal of it, and then that's the rubber of it. And then there's the other bearings inside there and the other race inside there. So that's why we're replacing the whole thing. The other one looked just like that, so I knew this one probably was too. Now, you can go and individually, now if this is your first time you pulled a hub off your trailer and you don't know, what size is that mine's a tapered spindle. There's a different size bearing on the outside than the inside. I need a certain size seal, and I don't know what it is. Pull a hub like I just did, take all this in a box to the trailer shop, right? We've got a trailer shop just a few miles from here. Every major city has some type of trailer shop, and they can match your parts for you, right, and hook you up. You might even be able to get them to pre-assemble the rear seal and race and rear bearings, right? Because that's the only thing that would be difficult if you're doing the whole thing yourself. Okay, I already know what size I'm dealing with, right? So what I'm going to do, I bought 2 new kits, okay, hub kits, and I'll show you that. That's what I'm replacing it with. And this is the hub that a while back. Now you got to make sure a couple things. I'm going to pull the other camera in. All right, so your seal, rear seal, sits on this surface. This surface needs to be clean, and it can't be any contaminants or anything there, right? And then your inner bearings are going to sit here. Your outer bearings are going to sit here. So all those surfaces need to be no big raised marks or damage. Okay, there can be some dings, and this here's got a little bit of crud on it from when a hub actually failed on this spindle, but other than that, it's fine. In this space here, nothing makes any contact. It's basically a pocket, or there's going to be a lot of grease, and that's it. Okay, so that's the spindle. Okay, and again, mine has a fitting here to grease it. Grease comes out down here under the bottom of the rear bearings, and so it greases the rear bearings. All right, let's take a quick look at this hub kit that I bought. Okay, first of all, I bought galvanized. Those other ones are not galvanized, and you've seen how rusty they got. Now these aren't impenetrable to contamination, but they'll hold up better. Okay, it came with the little metal cap we saw that I told you I don't use. It came with the cotter pin that I don't need because I use that other washer, right? It came with new lug nuts, which is nice. And then it came with the hub, bearings, seal. And the real nice thing about these is that rear seal is already installed. The rear bearing's already installed. The rear bearing race is already installed. So let's get this guy out. All right, so let's take a peek inside this hub. All right, so there's my inner bearings already in there. The inner bearing race is already in there. When I go to push this on, if I hit the edge of that spindle as I'm going on, it can push these out. These are not permanently installed until we put the washers and all that stuff back on. Okay, so just understand that. But that is permanently installed. So that's our seal. Inside of there is our outer bearing, or our inner bearing, I'm sorry. This one at the end on the outside, outer bearing. On the inside, inner bearing. Okay, so that and the race, that's all installed. This is a good deal because that's, if there's a difficult part to any of this, it's getting those bearing races seated in there, right? Sometimes they have to be pressed in. And then another thing unique about this one is, you see there's a little Zerk fitting right here. So I can grease this. This is going to grease the rear bearings. Now, since my spindle already has a Zerk fitting that does the same thing, it's not a big deal. I didn't need this. But if you get that one with the little round cap and you get this, right, now you can grease your hub. Okay, all right, so I'm going to clean that spindle up better, and then we're going to get ready to install this bad boy. All right, make sure any parts you're reusing you clean well, right? Shouldn't be any rust left on there. I use a wire brush to knock off any surface rust, and then I wipe them down real well. If you want, right, get some parts cleaner, throw them in the parts cleaner for a while. The main thing is you don't want any rust on there, and you don't want any, like if you rub it and you feel graininess, right, that's probably some old metal that's worn off of the bearings. You don't want that in there, because what's that going to do? It's going to start tearing up your new bearings. Okay, so once you're comfortable with how clean it is, you're ready to start putting this thing back together. So again, when you're looking at this thing, lug nuts go out, right? Lug nuts go out. That means your seal goes in on the inside. Take a little bit of that grease that's sitting there and get it on that seal, right? So it can just slide over that piece, that metal piece on the back there, and seat itself a little better. Okay, not too much. What you don't want to do is put a bunch of grease back here, and then when you go driving down the road, the grease that's sitting there is going to sling around, and then when you go to inspect your trailer, you're going to be like, oh my god, I must have a grease leak, you know, I got to do my hub. Not necessarily so. Okay, so remember, this bearing could push out. Let's give it a shot, see what happens. Oh, there's going to be a bunch of grease. There it is. So that's some of the grease that they put in. Right? Nothing wrong with that. Just gonna go whoop. Remember, I got a Zerk fitting. I'm gonna add more grease afterwards. Some of this grease you can try to pack back in. And then take your rags. This is the part that, oh, you get so dirty and greasy, but let's see, dirty and greasy and save a couple $100. Mark, put me down for that job. So, reverse order. So the last thing I took off before I pulled the hub with the bearings was the washer, right? So the washer, it's not perfectly round. It's got one flat side, and the spindle has a flat side. So that's how you know how to put it on there. Whoop, perfect. Okay. Get some more of that grease out of the way now, because there's no need for it way out here now. I mean, it'll protect the metal, but it's not in where the bearings are anymore. That just blocked it. I just got grease on the driveway. Never like doing that. I guess if you're really concerned about your workspace, lay out some cardboard underneath here too, so if anything drips or drops, you're covered. All right, so next is the washer, right, that has the two tabs on it. And again, it's round except for one side that's flat, and that's where those tabs fit. Okay, so it goes on. And then our castle bearing goes on, or our castle nut, I mean. Right, this guy goes on. Now, some people are like, hey, is there a torque spec for that? How tight do you make it? That's the challenging question. Here's what I do, okay? And again, I'm more shade tree than anything, but I've done a lot of these. I'm going to tighten that down to where I get no play, right, this way, and it's tight to turn this, okay? And what I'm doing is I'm tightening it enough to make sure that this outer bearing and race are set, okay? Once I'm confident of that, I'll back it off so that you can turn this. And then ultimately, right, you put the tire on, and the tire should spin pretty freely, but you don't want it where if I just touch it, it just sits there and spins and spins. You know this is too loose. So, I'm going to tighten her up just a little bit more. Right there. I can't. That's about as tight as she needs to be. So now I'm going to back off. Remember, I got to line up the openings in my castle nuts with the little washer I have there. So one's lined up now, but I know that's too tight. I figured right about there is probably going to be right. Okay. So I got one lined up. So I need a small flathead screwdriver to lay that thing down. Small flathead, it's right here. So I'm going to bend it up into the castle nut. That castle nut has play, but it can't loosen, right? And this is tight enough that I'm confident it's going to be good. Again, if you're not sure, put the tire on. We'll do that right now. Okay. Now that hub wasn't real easy to turn, but now look at it. That's just right. A little pressure, she spins, and then she stops. It would, if I do it and it would just stop right away, too tight. If I do it a little bit like that and it just kept spinning, too loose. All right, let's get that out of the way. I want to clean the back of this wheel. You can see the rust because that other one, remember, wasn't galvanized. These ones are galvanized, so it shouldn't be as big of an issue, but I don't want that to get any worse. So I'm going to clean it off real good, and I'm probably going to use some corrosive X or something like that on it to keep it from corroding that bad again. We're almost done with this hub, and that's what this video is about, not the tire. My last step is put a new cap on there, and I showed you that kit didn't come with them, but you can order them. I ordered them online. Got a 4-pack because you see me tap it off. Sometimes you can reuse them with no problem. Sometimes they start getting dinged up, so since I'm replacing the hubs completely and not just adjusting them, I'm going to go ahead and replace these too. And it's good to have spares. I'll put a link to that on Amazon down below. Alright, so now you got to be careful tapping these on because you don't want to bash it up too much and mess up that seal you got. So get it on. Kind of like when we took it off. Use one hand to stabilize, get it started. I'm going to put this piece of 2x4 over it and then hit it in the center. So we're not hitting just one little area, we're kind of hitting the whole thing evenly, less likely to tweak it. Okay, put it on there. Looks like she squeezed all the grease out. All right. So, I don't think the rest needs any video, right? Hub's installed. I can grease my normal grease fitting here. I could also grease that one back there if I wanted to. But that wasn't too bad of a job, right? It didn't take that long. Alright folks, we're done, right? I just got to slap this tire on, tighten the lug nuts, drop it on the ground, tighten the lug nuts the rest of the way, and it's time to do the other side. So I hope that helped you out. Some of you will look at that and be like, nah, yeah, I'm going to take it to the shop. Some of you will be like, oh, it ain't that hard. Some pliers, screwdrivers, hammer, jack. So if you're in the mood to try it yourself, do it. I say go for it. You know, I grew up doing stuff myself, and yeah, I messed some things up along the way, but I learned a lot. Okay. All right, folks. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button down below. It helps out the channel a lot. A thumbs up does the same thing, right? There's a notification bell, so when I do another video, when it uploads, you'll be notified about it. All that stuff helps YouTube's analytics and gets these videos out there to help grow the channel. All right. All right. Till next time. Peace out.